The founder's journey is about more than just creating a business. It's a turbulent, exciting, overwhelming pursuit to see what we're capable of, not just as business owners, but as people. It requires learning new skills, meeting the right people, and continually challenging and upgrading the way that we think to handle the next level of our entrepreneurial journey while building the life that we love. This isn't an easy path. So I want to invite you in to learn from other founders and industry leaders on their lessons, their skill sets, and how to take the next step that's right for you and me. Let the journey begin. All right, welcome to episode 1, The Founder's Journey. This is a milestone for me because it's the first podcast I've done since I launched my business back in 2023, which is ironic because it's a podcast production business. And ever since I started my business, my intention was always to kick off a show. And I battled with a lot of different ideas, but nothing really felt right. I battled between just following my own passions and going for something that was very much about the things that I love and very personal development heavy, and doing something that was much more business focused, which would be more of a strategic move for the business to be able to build an audience of people who would like to come in and work with me. And after 18 months of being in this business and learning so much along the way, I found a sweet spot. I found a sweet spot where I recognized that the life of a founder is a lot of the times a personal development journey. And when I think about the times where I've had the most success and the most growth and the most momentum, it's come from when I'm in a good place within myself, when my health is thriving, when I'm putting out an energy into the world that is so much more vibrant and does attract. And so it was hard for me to not want to talk about that, because I think that is arguably the biggest part of building a business, is how we show up in our entire life and use a business as the vehicle to succeed and to share a message and to make an impact on the world. And that's the journey that I want to go on, to explore how other people think about that journey and how they've tackled it, and bring the practical elements and the strategies and the tools, as well as those deeper conversations. So let me dive into the why behind the podcast. We all want very similar things, if not the same thing. We want to be a better leader. We want to be a better father, mother, sister, brother, husband, wife, sibling, whatever it is. We want to improve and we want to progress. If you're like me, you probably want to make more money and make a greater impact, and feel free to go and explore the things and build the things without restrictions. We want to be challenged and not at the detriment of our health. I think if you're a founder and you've been in the business for at least a couple of years, you'll know that sometimes you've got to go hard and sometimes there isn't really much balance. But I don't think it has to get so bad that we reach burnout or our health suffers dramatically. I'm in a season at the moment where there is a lot of work and it kind of feels a bit like a hamster wheel. And for a short period, I stopped training and I stopped going out and looking after my health. And it didn't take long before I saw what that was doing to my mental health, to my energy, and to me wanting to show up as well in my business. And I feel like there is so much that I don't have worked out. And so I want to explore that, people. I want to explore it with other founders and industry leaders and people who have found their vehicle and their own philosophies and their own ways of doing life. And I think there's a lot to be told in what goes on behind closed doors, because a lot of the times we can think that they had success because they implemented a really good email funnel, or they started doing paid advertising, or they started networking more. And that is true, but what was it behind making those decisions? And how did they overcome their own limiting beliefs? And how did they take those steps to the next level for them? I want to learn how these people think and how they handle adversity and what skills that they think are really important. And I also want to share from my experience and share the things that I've learned and bring you on a journey myself within my own world of podcasting and personal branding and content creation and marketing. And I guess the first place with that is for you to understand a little bit about my journey and how I got to where I am now, because I actually think it is a really important story. Because there's a famous quote by Steve Jobs that says, you can only connect the dots looking back, you can't connect them looking forward. When I think back to being 14 years old, picking up a camera for the very first time, I didn't expect that I would be here. All I knew at that time was I was passionate and I was creative and I just wanted to go out and take photos. My dream growing up was to be a landscape photographer. I wanted to have a big gallery and have my images hanging on people's walls, and in particular, shooting out in nature, in the ocean. And that passion grew pretty quickly for me. By the time I was 17, I had a Facebook page. I had 10,000 people following me at the time. And it gave me my very first opportunity, which was shooting spare parts for a business called Husqvarna. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I would go on to work for them for about 6 months, full time, shooting over 2,500 products for their catalog. And it wasn't that exciting. It was tires and lawn care parts and washers and springs and bolts and all of that kind of stuff. But that gave me a massive stepping stone to realize that I can do this full time. I didn't really have a plan of what I was going to do. I didn't want to go to uni. I worked in a retail job for about 8 months, and I left that a few months after I got this opportunity because I realized that I didn't have to keep working in a retail job, and it was scary, but it ultimately worked out. So at 17, I started my first business. I had no idea what I was doing. I kind of just took on everything and anything that I could, but I had some really, really good people in my corner, and I had people who would take me all around the world with them, and I would get paid to do that. And for me in that time of my life, I wasn't really overthinking the process, and so things kind of just flowed, and it definitely wasn't lucrative. I was constantly fighting for money, but it was always just enough to kind of get by. And I went on to build that over the course of about 6 years, a business as a content creator, as a photographer and a videographer. And eventually it got a bit much. I was making 6 figures a year. I'd worked with over 130 clients, and I just kind of lost the passion for it. I didn't really know what I was doing it for. There was no real depth to the work that I was doing, but I didn't realize that at the time. All I knew was I felt shit and I just wanted to move on. And so I kept doing that a little bit on the side, but over the next couple of years, I worked on a few different businesses. I partnered with a friend of mine, Jared, to build a gym, which just before COVID, I exited. So it was about a bit under a year later. And because I wasn't a trainer, my role was in the back end and the marketing. As we came into that COVID lockdown, it didn't make sense for me to be there anymore. And there was some really, really pivotal lessons that I learned during that time. One of them I'll touch on, it was understanding who we're for. We kind of went into that business thinking we would create something new for the industry. We were going to blend mindfulness and training together in a very unique way. And we kind of did it first and hoped people would come later. And some people really loved it, but a lot of people really just preferred to train and really just preferred to push hard, which was the original business model. And that was it. That was a huge lesson of mine. A second business, which we actually built earlier, was called Bridge the Gap. And it was going to be a personal development platform for men. We had these huge ambitions. It was me and Jared, who I built the gym with, and Mitch, another friend. And we had these big ambitions to build a global app for men, all centered around personal development and journaling and running events and just creating a massive impact on young guys to help them bridge the gap from where they were to where they wanted to be. That was the very first podcast that I ever started, was the Bridge the Gap podcast. And we filmed 30 episodes of that. Man, it took us interstate and we interviewed some really, really powerful people. And again, COVID kind of interrupted that journey for us. And so we pulled everything back and went down to running local events. We ran a run club and we ran events locally in Terrigal. And that actually became really fulfilling became really fulfilling just to sit in a room full of 15 or 20 guys to just talk and to just help each other to see our own potential. But eventually we had to park that, COVID being a big reason for that. But we decided to kind of go our own ways. And after that, I went into business with my accountant at the time, Ryan, who really wanted to do a lot more content creation. So I came in and we developed some courses. We developed an online coaching program that we built for the building industry. And when we launched that, we actually saw really, really quick results. We kind of had that initial big burst of having a lot of success. And the whole point of the program was to help builders to make the transition from being a builder to being a property developer, where there was more money to be made, but people didn't have to work with clients. They could work on their own projects. And we worked on that for about 18 months until I kind of woke up one day and I asked the question, like, how did I get here? Because building for me was not really a passion of mine, and developing wasn't really a passion, or property. And I didn't really know the financial game. I loved learning about it, but it wasn't a passion of mine. And I woke up and I was just like, I don't know how I got here, but this isn't for me. And so over the next 3 or so months, I started to journal. I sat down and I was journaling on what it is that I really wanted to do and what lit me up. And I learned about this exercise, which I later called passion blending, where you take all of the different things that you're interested, all the different passions and all the hobbies and the skill sets and everything, and you kind of bring them all together and you start to create a bit of a combination of what you can go out and do in the world. And there were so many things that I was interested in, and that was part of the problem. But when I looked at the things that had stood out and stood the test of time for me, it was content creation, it was videography and photography and being a creative, and it was conversations, and it was learning, and it was understanding people's stories and their businesses. And it became very clear to me quickly that I wanted to start a podcast production business. I had developed 4 or 5 podcasts up until that point, so I knew how it was done. So I started from that place, and ThinkLoud was born from there in 2023. And 18 months later, as I record this podcast, I produce 13 different shows and worked with over 25 entrepreneurs and founders and really, really impactful leaders to amplify their voice through not only podcasting, but video production as well. It has been the most fulfilling journey, because seeing people start their podcast journey and seeing them get in front of camera for the first time isn't always glamorous. It can be shaky, it can take a lot of time, and it can be uncomfortable. And oftentimes it is really uncomfortable. But then seeing those people develop over time, share their voice more confidently, and see their platform grow, that doesn't get old for me. And now it's my turn to step in and grow something that I can be really, really passionate about on a new level. And so that is why the Founder's Journey exists. And I hope that this gives you a good insight into, what we can expect, what you can expect. This is episode 1, and I've got a vision of where I want to take it, but how that plays out, I have no idea. And so I hope I can bring you along the journey. It would mean a lot to me if you could share this podcast, if you could leave a review. I know this is the first episode, but if you listen to a few episodes and you really enjoy it, please leave a review and follow along, subscribe, and click the follow button, because it helps a lot more than you probably realize to get this podcast in front of more people. So let the journey begin and let the journey continue. I'll see you in the next one.